we want to start off because there is some recruiting news. The Mississippi State Bulldogs picked up a commitment over the weekend from offensive lineman Cam'Ron Thompson, a 6'3", 300-pound interior prospect out of Havana, Florida, Gadsden County High School. 247 Sports rates him as an 86 overall 3-star, the number 99 interior O-line prospect, number 142 player within the state of Florida. 86 overall on the 247 composite as well. A kid that you look at the offer sheet and you see a couple programs really jump off. You see Auburn, you see Texas A&M, and it's like, okay, maybe the offers don't quite line up with the current projection. Now, I will say those are offers that did happen pretty early in the cycle, so there is some level of how much are those teams really pursuing. But even beyond those programs, you do have legitimately good power conference offers for this guy. Virginia Tech, NC State, Vanderbilt recently offered, Louisville offered last September. So you've got solid power conference programs that are offering Thompson. And look, this is another good pickup for Mississippi State. You're now up to 5 offensive linemen in the class for the season. And Sports Talk with Austin, what's up, guys? What's going on? I just checked comments for the first time. You've got 5 offensive linemen committed now in the class. And of those guys, all of them have other power conference offers. Obviously, Dalton Toothman sort of leads the way when you look at the teams that he had at the top of the list. Clemson going after him, Ole Miss, Auburn. Really good list of teams. And look, so far, Phil Loadholt is doing a very good job with what he is doing on the recruiting trail in terms of building up this class. And obviously, you've had a couple decommitments. 2 of the higher-rated guys you had between Emmanuel Tucker and Jacoby Green, both decommitting, and now Tucker committed to LSU, Green's committed to Florida State, and actually you offered Thompson shortly after losing Green. So it was just sort of a 1-month turnaround between offering him and getting that commitment. But look, if you're going to have to lose a player and make up for him, bringing in a guy who does have other power conference offers and does have legitimate programs that are interested in him, and not just going after guys, as we've kind of seen on the defensive side of the ball, where the rest of the offer list doesn't really impress all that much. I think that's a good sign for the program. And look, you've got to build up the trenches more. That is a huge point of emphasis, I think, for Jeff Lebby and Phil Loadholt for that matter, because of where State is at right now on the roster with an offensive line standpoint, having to be so transfer portal heavy. You've got to start loading up these guys in the high school ranks. And how many of these guys are really going to develop and be impact players? That's tough to say. O-line is one of those positions where it's tough to really project going forward who is going to really develop at the next level. Even the kids who have the big frames coming out of high school, not all of them get to college and end up being big-time players. It's really tough to see who's going to put on weight, who's going to keep their athleticism. Because of that, you just kind of have to stockpile solid players or good players if possible, and hope those guys turn into really good players for you down the line. So it's good to see what's happening with the O-line class. I like the work that Loadholt has done. We've seen it on the transfer portal trail. Now we're seeing it in the high school ranks. And, getting into Mississippi State's offensive class as a whole, or really their class as a whole, ranked 44th nationally, 247. Now there's no getting around that is not good enough. That would be the worst the program has had in a very long time. The previous low as far in recent history was, I think they were 41st in 2011, which that's one of those very interesting years where State's 41st in the rankings. It's, on paper, a terrible signing class for the program. And yet that's the class that produces guys like, a Dak Prescott, a Josh Robinson, a Dylan Day. I think Bernard McKinney may or may not have been in that class. You had a lot of players who ended up being absolute superstars for Mississippi State that were not highly rated coming out of high school. But look, I'm the last person to try to argue that stars don't matter. They do. Recruiting rankings do matter. You can't just rely on the guys who end up being the diamonds in the rough. And I think it's getting harder and harder to find those types of guys. That being said, when it comes to the offensive class, State's done a pretty good job. You have a few guys that are highly ranked 3-stars, and frankly, guys who probably should be 4-stars. Dalton Toothman, as I mentioned earlier, right now is an 87 overall offensive tackle. With the offers that guys has, I would think that guy probably projects more as a 4-star. The one that no one can possibly understand, J.J. Hill from Tupelo. I don't know how anyone has watched that kid play and comes away with anything other than that he's a 4-star legitimate SEC player. And the offer sheet backs it up. He's got a lot of big-time programs after him. Those are guys you could see moved up. Zayon Cotton, kind of the wide receiver tight end hybrid guy out of Grenada. 89 overall. Right now, he's your highest rated commitment. That's a guy that could get bumped up. And I think rivals may have had him as a 4-star previously. Zion Crumpton at receiver is another one as an 88 overall, a speedy receiver, which, you want plenty of that in the Jeff Lebby offense. Brody McCorder at quarterback, kind of a borderline 3-4-star type prospect. For me, I look at the offensive class, and I think you're in a pretty good place with the pieces that you've been able to bring in. At every single position, you've got guys with legitimate power conference offers. You've got guys with legitimate SEC offers stepping in. And that's sort of the big thing I'm going to look to there. With Lebby, I'm going to trust that they're going to get the offensive production. And I'm going to trust that they're going to be able to put those guys in positions to succeed. And I talked about this in the last show. It's probably a thing I'm going to say time and time again because I think it's a valid point to hit on when it comes to projecting recruiting rankings versus production on the field. You can take lesser offensive talent, and because of just the nature with offense in terms of using motions, using formations, option schemes, RPOs, just playing with spacing, playing with tempo, misdirection, all of those tools, you can take guys that maybe are not superstars, and as long as you have a couple guys who are pretty decent athletes, you can find ways to make offense productive. And if there's anyone that's going to be able to field a productive offense just off the pieces they have, Jeff Lebby is one of those guys, which is why I look at this class and I look at the receiving talent that they're bringing in. It's like, okay, yeah, those are guys State can absolutely work with. Those are guys State will fit well within this offense. You've got some speedsters. You got guys who are burners downfield. Cotton at tight end, a receiving threat, big body tight end. Lebby's made good use of those guys in the past. McWhorter, I know that's kind of how much is that guy really going to play for you, given what you're expecting at the future at quarterback? But you got to take a quarterback every single year in the class, and that's a guy who power conference programs want, other SEC programs we're interested in. And then J.J. Hill at running back is really good. O-line was kind of the one place where it was a little iffy, but as I mentioned, Dalton Toothman is a really good pickup for them. And with the other guys they have in that class, just getting big bodies in, guys who have reasonable athleticism, reasonable offers, you can work with that. So, I look at the offensive class. I think that side of the ball, they're in fine shape. Sports Talk, it's really hard to keep guys and bring guys in after the program has had a rough 2 years since Mike Leach passed away. It's been rough for Mississippi State playing in a rough SEC conference. You're not wrong. And it definitely, the program is very much in flux at this moment, and it's going to take some time working the transfer portal, which they've done, and to really solidify and create a basis and foundation to build off of. And then it has to come in with the high school ranks. I don't think you can rely on the portal long term. But again, I like what they're doing at the high school level when it comes to offensive recruiting. Defensive recruiting is another story. Defensive recruiting is frankly why this class is in the position that it is right now. It's just ranked 44th. You have a lot of guys where State is the only power conference offer. You have a lot of guys where you're competing against Sun Belt and MAC programs and FCS programs for commitments. We know that's not going to cut it. We also know at this point it's kind of going to have to be a proof of concept thing. We talked about this a little bit on the last show. The only way you're really going to get guys interested in defense and coming and playing for this program is if you show it on the field that side of the ball has taken a step forward, or even if the defense struggles mightily again this year, are you strong enough offensively that it boosts you to a big season, at which case you win a few more games than maybe you're supposed to, you get some momentum, at which point a few defensive players say, you know what, I want to get on board with that. Maybe they're not a great defense, but that's a fun team I want to go play for. Offensive recruiting is going to be fine under Lebby. Even if the program struggles, Lebby has proof of concept as a play caller that you can come play for me and you're going to have a ton of production and I have a chance to develop you for the next level. So I'm not worried about the offensive recruiting. I think the offensive class to this point is in good shape. Defensive recruiting is where it's really going to have to take a step up. I'd imagine at this point, how many commitments does State have? They are at 26 commits to this point, and I know they're going to be in on more kids. You kind of have the bulk of the class made up. At this point, it's really a question of, do you get a few more guys at the defensive side of the ball? Do you process a few of the commitments that you have currently? Does any of that change? Will Lawrence coming in biggest issue with recruiting I see is not even being able to get a visit from the higher ranked players in state. And they got one total visit from the top 10. That is definitely a big problem. That is a huge problem right now, which it's a problem that weirdly is not exclusive to state. Now, the visit thing, Ole Miss is getting kids in on visits. State right now is not. But Ole Miss is also having a hard time keeping players in. Now, I'm not going to use that as an excuse. It's weird to me that Ole Miss is not making hay with a lot of these in-state recruits, especially with the talent there. I know there's always kind of a mentality of these guys just want to be able to go and get it. There's a lot of kids who grew up thinking, I got to get out of Mississippi. And because of that, you get some of these prospects, especially those who get the opportunity to go and play for a blue blood brand. As soon as they get that opportunity, they're gone. They're not going to stay home. That said, you would think with Ole Miss, with the way they've been playing in recent years, that they would be able to keep those guys in state a little bit more. And so it's an issue that goes beyond state. But to Will's point, yeah, not even being able to get them on campus is definitely an issue as well. Still, I think the offensive class I'm fine with. It is purely from what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. That's where the recruiting class is really slipping. That's what's going to have to change to really turn things around. Again, for Sports Talk with Austin, Mississippi State does have a great history. Do you think these last couple of years have set them back in getting guys to come to Mississippi State? 100%. It is very much a case of what has transpired over these last few years, the program taking a downturn. And look, I do think you can go back a few years ago, even before things had fallen off. Some of those recruiting relationships were probably damaged a little bit with just some of the guys within the program and their roles in recruiting. You weren't doing a good enough job of staying on top of some of the best talent in state, and that definitely hurts you. Then once the program takes a nosedive, it really falls off a cliff. State's going to have to work to build that back up. That is a huge thing. And look, I think they got guys on staff who are good recruiters. I keep saying it. Offensively, I think they're going to be fine. It is a defensive recruiting issue for me at this point. But look, to close out talking recruiting, Cam'Ron Thompson, good pickup for State. I think you probably rounded out your O-line class at this point with 5 commitments. I'm sure if there's a can't-miss prospect, you would still make room. You can't have enough big bodies in the room. But so far, you've done a good job recruiting the offensive line and offense as a whole.